Hey guys, tonight we drift back to the final spring of Nazi Germany, a season that smelled of brick dust, diesel smoke, and hopeless resolve. You're in Berlin, April 1945. The wind cuts through the city's skeleton like a saw, rattling broken tram wires and flapping torn propaganda posters that still promise victory. Old men hunker behind overturned trolleys. Teenage boys grip Panzerfausts too heavy for their hands, and every street feels like a tomb waiting for its tenants. You probably won't survive this night, but then again, no one really does here.
So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there.
Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through the rubble of the Reich's capital, every step crunching glass and mortar. Above you, the sky isn't blue. It's the sickly orange of artillery illumination. In the distance, the thunder you hear isn't weather. It's the Red Army's guns echoing from the outskirts of the city. Somewhere beyond the Spree River, the Soviets are closing the ring, kilometer by kilometer. The air tastes metallic and the ground trembles as tanks roll closer. Once, Berlin was the jewel of Europe, a city of theaters, cafes, and trams gliding along Unter den Linden. Now, it's a ghost orchestra of grinding metal, distant shouting, and the eerie bark of Panzerfausts fired by boys who haven't yet learned to shave. You pass a Volkssturm barricade. 3 logs, a tram car, and a pile of sandbags stitched together with desperation. A gray-haired man wearing his World War I Iron Cross clutches a rifle that predates radio. Beside him stands a 16-year-old in a Hitler Youth armband, his uniform too big, sleeves rolled twice. The boy's face is pale, his eyes wider than the trench gap between fantasy and fear.
Hold until the Führer returns, the sergeant says. He doesn't mention from where.
Berlin's last defenders are a collage of what once was. Wounded veterans dragged from hospitals, postal clerks in steel helmets, and boys who had spent their last spring in gymnasiums chanting loyalty oaths. Historians still argue whether this final stand was patriotic duty or mass delusion, but you can smell in the air that no amount of speeches can hold back the Red Army. The Volkssturm, the so-called People's Storm, was supposed to be the answer. Conceived in late 1944 when the Reich was already bleeding from every front, it was Hitler's vision of total mobilization. Every male from 16 to 60 pressed into defense of the fatherland. In theory, it sounded formidable. Millions of new fighters swelling the ranks. In reality, it was chaos stitched with propaganda. You watch as volunteers, or rather those too slow to hide, are handed mismatched weapons. Some get old Mauser rifles. Others are given Italian carbines or Czech submachine guns. Ammunition? Maybe 10 rounds, if they're lucky. A few receive Panzerfausts, single-shot tubes meant to kill tanks, though most can't aim them without setting their own hair on fire. The training lasts hours, not weeks. The command structure is a muddle of party officials and army officers who distrust one another more than the enemy. Somewhere, a gramophone plays a scratchy march that no one listens to anymore. A quirky tidbit. Many Volkssturm units drilled with wooden sticks because real rifles were too precious. They practiced in bombed-out courtyards, marching in circles, shouting slogans louder than their stomachs growled. One boy later wrote that his instructor told them, "Discipline is our ammunition." He wasn't joking. You turn a corner into what used to be Alexanderplatz. The Fernsehturm hasn't been built yet. Instead, the square is dominated by cratered streets and a toppled statue of Frederick the Great. Nearby, a group of civilians huddles in a basement. They stare at you as if you're already dead. Maybe you are, just walking slower than the shells. Above ground, the regime clings to delusion. Hitler sits in his bunker not far from where you stand, sketching maps on a trembling table. He insists the Soviets will falter, that relief armies will break through from the west, that Germany's spirit cannot die. His generals exchange glances, but not anyway. Down here in the city, that spirit has become something hollow. fanaticism born of fear. You can sense the contradiction. Propaganda blaring through loudspeakers, telling citizens to fight to the last, while whispers spread that the Führer is already lost in his own labyrinth of fantasies. It's the same contradiction you feel in your bones, the absurd hope that somehow this could still be turned around. A shell lands close enough to shake dust from the ceiling. The boy beside you flinches, clutching his Panzerfaust like a teddy bear. He's probably thinking of his mother's kitchen, of sausages sizzling in a pan, of a future that ended 6 months ago. Someone yells that the Soviets have reached the Tear Garden. Someone else says they've been stopped. Nobody knows. The radio spits static and empty orders. The air raid sirens still sound, though there's nothing left to bomb. You find a small notebook lying in the debris. Inside, a soldier had written, "If I fall, tell them I fought in Berlin." The last line trails off mid-word, as if the writer was interrupted by the very event he anticipated. That's the essence of April 1945. Sentences that never end. The night deepens, but it doesn't get darker. The fires keep the city lit like a furnace. You move toward the Brandenburg Gate. Soviet artillery silhouettes the ruins like strobe lights at a macabre festival. Somewhere, church bells ring once, maybe from shock. The air carries that mix of fear and stubbornness that defines collapsing empires. Here, humor still exists, though brittle as glass. A soldier near you mutters, "At least there's no shortage of bricks for building barricades." The others chuckle, the sound halfway between a laugh and a cough. Historians debate whether the defense of Berlin was truly necessary. Some claim it bought time for civilians to flee westward. Others argue it was senseless butchery to satisfy one man's ego. The truth probably lies in that gray rubble around you, neither noble nor purely mad, just human in its refusal to let go. A small moment of quiet falls. The distant guns pause, maybe reloading, maybe deciding you're not worth another shell. You look up and see snowflakes, or maybe ash, drifting from the sky. They settle on the muzzle of your rifle, melt instantly, then vanish. Somewhere nearby, someone starts humming a lullaby. You recognize it from childhood. It's the same melody mothers once sang in warm apartments before blackout curtains became standard furniture. For a fleeting second, you feel warmth, memory, humanity. Then another explosion reminds you that sentiment is a luxury long expired. The Volkssturm commander shouts orders you can barely hear over the din. You see him pointing toward the Reichstag. It's symbolic now, more ruin than building, yet still an icon. He says reinforcements will arrive by morning. You know better. There are no reinforcements. There's only the end, dressed in the costume of hope. You glance around at your comrades. One man's hands shake so violently he can't load his weapon. Another keeps whispering prayers. The boy from earlier stares blankly into the fire, lips moving silently, maybe rehearsing his own goodbye. In this city of stone and smoke, you realize something simple. Every empire dies twice, once in battle and once in memory. Berlin's first death is happening before your eyes. The second will depend on how stories like this are told. You step over a sign half buried in rubble. Jeder tritt seinen Dienst an. Everyone performs his duty. The irony is unbearable. Duty has lost meaning when the government it serves has dissolved into myth. The night draws to a close. In a few hours, Soviet tanks will roll through this very street. The last defenders will either die, surrender, or vanish into cellars. Some will later claim they fought for honor. Others will deny ever having been here. You'll remember the smell of dust and cordite, the taste of fear, and the sound of a dying city whispering its own elegy. And yet, amidst that ruin, you can't help but marvel at how quiet courage sometimes wears the face of futility. You exhale, the breath mingling with smoke. Somewhere, a clock strikes midnight, though nobody knows what day it is anymore. The war still has weeks to run, but Berlin's story, the story you're walking through right now, has already ended. It just doesn't know it yet. You wake before dawn, if you can call it that, beneath a sky the color of ash.
The air smells of coal smoke, wet cement, and something faintly sweet, like rotting fruit. Somewhere in the distance, Goebbels' voice still echoes through a crackling loudspeaker, replaying the same speech on an endless loop. Wollt ihr den totalen Krieg? Do you want total war? He had shouted it years ago, in a packed sport palace filled with roaring crowds, but now, the words sound more like an accusation than a rallying cry. You climb over a heap of shattered bricks, the frost crunching under your boots. Around you, life is reduced to fragments. A woman drags a wooden cart piled with bread crusts. A soldier, with a bandaged head, limps past, carrying a single grenade as if it's his passport to relevance. The front line isn't out there anymore. It's here, on the doorstep of every apartment block, in every courtyard. Total war has come home. You hear children's voices down an alley. Not laughter, drills. A small cluster of Hitler youth march in formation, their uniforms spotless, but their rifles wooden. A local party official, his coat still bearing the faded golden badge of the NSDAP, barks commands. Stand straight! Die for Germany if you must. His voice trembles, and you can't tell if it's passion or fear. Historians still argue whether these boys believed what they were told or simply obeyed out of terror. Many had never left their neighborhoods. They didn't know what defeat meant beyond vague whispers about Bolsheviks. Their world was posters, parades, and a Führer who spoke like a god. A shell lands somewhere to the west, rattling windows. The children scatter, shrieking. The official ducks behind a doorway. You almost laugh, one of those dark, dry chuckles that catches in your throat. Total war, you mutter. Apparently doesn't include bravery during artillery barrages. By 1945, the phrase total war had devoured its creator. What had begun as propaganda, mobilizing every German to serve the Reich's survival, had turned into literal truth. Women were conscripted to sew uniforms, dig trenches, and load munitions. School teachers were told to train with rifles. Civil servants became field medics overnight, and in cities like Dresden, Hamburg, and Berlin, civilians lived in bunkers stacked like coffins, waiting for the bombs. You step into a stairwell plastered with posters. One shows a grinning soldier with the words, "Every man is a fighter." Another warns against desertion, "Traitors will hang." Someone has scratched over the soldier's smile with charcoal, adding devil horns. The ink bleeds in the damp air. A quirky detail? In late 1944, the Ministry of Propaganda distributed leaflets titled 10 Commandments for Every German. They included rules like, don't complain, act, and your example inspires others to fight. One even advised citizens to rejoice in destruction if it meant victory. You can imagine the absurdity of that, sitting in a bombed-out flat counting potatoes. You push open a door and find yourself in what used to be a bakery. The ceiling has collapsed, but the smell of yeast still lingers. A few people sit among the debris. Neighbors, maybe refugees from the east. They glance up at you, silent, their eyes hollow. One woman offers you a crust of bread, the corners hard as stone. You accept it, even though it tastes like dust. Outside, a loudspeaker crackles again. It's Goebbels, his voice shrill and brittle like cracked porcelain. He declares that Germany will never surrender, that every street will be defended, that Berlin will become the heart of the world's resistance. You've heard this sermon so many times it feels like a nursery rhyme gone sour. You walk past a row of houses, stripped of plaster. In one window, a portrait of Hitler still hangs, crooked, the glass cracked right across his eyes. A small irony, the Führer's vision finally shattered. Then, faintly, you hear church bells. Not many, most churches are rubble now, but a few still stand, ringing defiantly into the chaos. The sound mingles with the rumble of tanks, creating a strange, almost sacred dissonance. You pause, realizing that even in apocalypse, people still cling to ritual. Maybe it's habit, or maybe it's hope in disguise. As the morning drags on, you reach a makeshift barricade built from furniture and cobblestones. An old man guards it, wearing his World War I uniform jacket, its buttons polished to a dull bronze. His name tag says, Schmidt. His voice trembles as he greets you. We held Verdun. We'll hold this. You want to believe him, but Verdun had artillery and supply lines and an army that still believed in a future. Here, there's only memory. Schmidt points to a boy crouched nearby. My grandson, he says. The kid nods, clutching a Panzerfaust almost as tall as he is. His hair is matted with soot, his lips cracked. You ask if he knows how to use it. He shrugs. Point and fire, he says. You wonder if he realizes that's both the instruction and his obituary. Historians debate whether these late defenders were heroes or victims. Some fought out of conviction, others out of fear. Fear of the Soviets, fear of execution, fear of betraying the illusion that Germany was still eternal. But watching them now, you sense something deeper, a human instinct to keep standing, even when standing makes no sense. A sudden whistle cuts the air. Mortar. You dive behind the barricade as the explosion sends shards of brick skimming overhead. The old man curses softly. The boy fires his Panzerfaust blindly into the smoke. A dull thump, then silence. When the haze clears, there's nothing but wreckage and the distant clatter of tank treads. You lie there, chest pounding, realizing that total war isn't a slogan anymore. It's just chaos with paperwork. Crawling to your feet, you spot a tattered newspaper pinned to a wall by a bayonet. The headline screams, "Victory is certain." The date? January 1945. 3 months old, from another reality. You tear it down and stuff it into your coat pocket. It feels like holding a ghost. A brief, absurd moment breaks through. A dog trots past, tail wagging, carrying a helmet in its mouth. Someone laughs, a dry, incredulous laugh that spreads among the barricade. For a few seconds, you all sound human again, but the laughter fades as another column of smoke rises from the east. The Red Army is advancing through the suburbs, demolishing what's left of German defenses. Soon they'll reach the city center. You can already feel the tremor of their artillery through the soles of your boots. In a nearby cellar, you hear a radio tuned to foreign broadcasts. Illegal, of course. The announcer speaks in careful German, describing the Allied progress on all fronts. The Reich, he says, is finished. The listeners sit in silence. No one disagrees, but when you glance up the stairs, you see a portrait of Hitler illuminated by a candle, his gaze fixed on the ceiling. Even now, his image presides over despair, like a ghost that refuses exorcism. You step back into the street as the snow, or ash, it's impossible to tell, continues to fall. A group of women carry buckets of water to douse a burning tram. One hums a lullaby under her breath. Another mutters, "It will all be over soon." She doesn't say whether she means the war or life itself. You walk on. The city feels both infinite and claustrophobic, like wandering inside a dying animal that refuses to lie still. Posters peel from the walls, slogans fade, but the machinery of obedience still grinds. For all its madness, total war has a perverse kind of logic. When everything is destroyed, you can't lose what you no longer have. That's the Reich's final truth. A civilization so consumed by control that it mistakes ruin for righteousness. As evening creeps in, you find yourself near the river. The bridges are rigged with explosives. A soldier kneels beside one, cigarette trembling between his fingers. You ask if he'll really blow it when the Soviets arrive. He shrugs. Maybe, or maybe I'll light another cigarette instead. For the first time, you both laugh. Not bitterly, but softly. The kind of laugh that acknowledges defeat without shame. And as the sun sets behind the smoke, the city glows red, not from sunset, but from its own burning heart. You realize that this is what total war truly means. Not triumph, not sacrifice, but the slow, stubborn refusal to admit that the fire has already won. The next morning, you wake to the sound of hammering. It isn't artillery this time. It's men nailing up posters. A new order from Berlin's district command. The headline screams in bold Gothic letters, 6 million for the fatherland. Beneath it, a portrait of Hitler stares out, pale and waxy, with the caption, "Every German, a soldier." You watch as a party official smooths the paper with his palm. The glue drips down like sweat. He steps back, squinting at his handiwork, then salutes the image before moving to the next wall. He doesn't notice that half the city behind him is already rubble. That's the absurd dream now driving the Reich, a fantasy army of 6 million ghosts. Hitler and his loyal aide, Martin Bormann, had conceived it back in October 1944, when the situation was already dire. The idea? Mobilize every able-bodied male between 16 and 60. That meant boys barely out of school, fathers with arthritis, even men missing limbs. The decree declared that this Volkssturm, the People's Storm, would be the final surge of national will. You can almost hear the echo of Bormann's voice, clipped and nasal, promising to summon the last reserves of the German soul. It sounded grand in speeches. In reality, it meant emptying the schools, hospitals, and factories. The Wehrmacht was already running on fumes. Now, the party sought to refill it with desperation. You turn a corner and find a conscription rally underway. The local Gauleiter stands on the steps of a ruined church, shouting through a megaphone. His uniform is spotless, his voice hoarse. Around him, townspeople shuffle uneasily. Old carpenters, shop clerks, teenage apprentices. The air is thick with a strange mix of fear and fatigue. "Germany needs you," the official yells. "We fight for civilization itself," someone mutters. "Civilization ended last month." You catch the remark, but the officer doesn't. He points toward the crowd. "No one is too old, no one too young." Then he gestures at a boy barely 15. "You! Step forward." The boy hesitates, then obeys. His mother starts crying quietly. Historians still argue whether this mass mobilization was a stroke of genius or pure madness. Some call it Hitler's national suicide note. Others claim it was simply the logical end of totalitarianism, a state that devours its citizens one conscription slip at a time. You stand among the recruits as they're handed armbands reading Volkssturm. No boots, no helmets, no training schedules, just a paper pass and a vague order to report to the local command post. One man jokes that they'll fight the Soviets with paperwork. No one laughs. A few trucks roll in, carrying rifles wrapped in oily rags. They're old, World War I Mausers, even hunting rifles confiscated from civilians. A sergeant barks, "Treat them like gold." The men obey, though one rifle's stock is cracked clean through. There's an eerie silence as the recruits disperse. They've just been drafted into a fantasy army that only exists on posters. The plan, at least on paper, envisions 6 million soldiers. The reality? Barely 500,000 ever saw combat, and most never even received uniforms. The numbers were delusion turned arithmetic. You follow one group of men trudging through the snow toward a half-collapsed schoolhouse, now serving as a training ground. Inside, a blackboard still lists arithmetic problems from a forgotten lesson. Beneath it, an officer with a cane draws diagrams of trenches and machine gun placements. "Your enemy is the Bolshevik," he shouts, tapping the chalk hard enough to break it. "He will destroy your homes, your families, your women. So fight until you can't breathe." The recruits nod, though most look dazed. You can see in their faces the exhaustion of years of rationing, bombing, and propaganda. They're not soldiers. They're ghosts, waiting for instructions. A quirky detail. Party officials printed pocket guides for Volkssturm fighters, filled with patriotic quotes and crude sketches of how to use anti-tank weapons. Some copies included blank pages titled "Personal Deeds of Valor," as if the bureaucracy anticipated heroism could be logged like attendance. You watch an elderly man raise his hand. "Herr Kommandant," he asks softly, What if the Russians don't come here? The officer glares. Then we go to them. That night, you sit with a few recruits in a cold classroom. Someone has lit a candle stub. They pass around a bottle of schnapps, each sip burning more from grief than alcohol. One man shows you a photo of his daughter. She's 8, he says. I told her I'm going on a trip. You don't ask where. The door creaks open. A party youth enters with a clipboard, reading names. Those called stand, salute, and vanish into the night. You wonder how many will return. Outside, snow drifts softly through shattered windows. It almost looks peaceful if you ignore the artillery flashes on the horizon. At dawn, you follow a column of Volkssturm marching out of town. They wear a mix of uniforms and civilian coats. One man carries a hunting shotgun, another a pitchfork. They move in silence except for the crunch of boots. Above them, a banner flaps, "Better to die standing than live kneeling." Historians debate whether the people believed that slogan or just feared the consequences of not pretending to. After all, refusal meant execution. But some did believe, in a twisted, desperate sense. They'd been told for years that Germany was divine, that surrender was sin. When faith becomes law, even hopelessness feels like duty. You pass a railway yard filled with burned-out freight cars. A few soldiers are scavenging coal. One turns to you and says, 6 million men, they say. If you find them, send them my way. We're out of coffee. It's gallows humor, the only kind left. Further on, you reach a checkpoint where SS officers inspect papers. Their uniforms gleam, their boots shine. They look out of place here, like predators dropped into a zoo. One sneers at a gray-haired recruit. 60, eh? You can still hold a rifle? The man doesn't answer. The officer laughs and waves him on. You realize the laughter sounds like panic disguised as power. By mid-afternoon, snow gives way to sleet. The column trudges through mud and slush, heading nowhere in particular. Someone whispers that the front line is collapsing near Salo Heights. Another says the Americans have crossed the Rhine. The rumors stack like bricks, building a wall no propaganda can breach. You stop at a crossroads where a signpost still points east. Kustrin, Frankfurt, Warsaw. All the arrows lead toward places already gone. A truck rattles past, its canvas cover flapping. You glimpse inside. Boxes of leaflets, thousands of them. Fight for the Führer until victory. The driver honks twice and disappears into the gray. You wonder if anyone will ever read them. As night falls, the men light fires with splintered furniture. You sit close, warming your hands. Someone pulls out a harmonica and begins to play a slow, mournful tune, Lily Marlene. It's the same song soldiers on every front once sang. For a few moments, the war feels distant, almost suspended. But then, gunfire echoes in the distance. The harmonica stops. Silence returns, heavy as wet wool. You look around at these 6 million, who are, in truth, a few hundred exhausted souls. Some will fight, others will run. None believe in victory anymore, but they march because stopping feels more dangerous than moving. And somewhere, far away in his bunker, Hitler still dreams of armies that exist only in his imagination, marching through smoke, eternal, invincible, and already dead. You lie back on the frozen ground, watching the sky flicker from artillery flashes. You wonder whether any of this will be remembered, or if it will all dissolve like those posters on the walls, their slogans peeled away by wind and rain until nothing remains but paper dust. You awaken to the sound of boots scraping across cobblestones, a disorganized rhythm, not the tight precision of a trained army. When you open your eyes, the scene feels like a parody of war. The recruits of the Volkssturm are assembling in a school courtyard that still smells faintly of chalk and ink. It's a place where multiplication tables once filled blackboards. Now, they drill people into cannon fodder. You stand among them, feeling the morning cold bite through your coat. Around you, faces lined with age, faces barely touched by it, all marked by the same quiet disbelief. Some men cough into their sleeves. Others stare into the distance, lips moving in private prayers. A few wear armbands, others scraps of uniforms from older wars. One man still has his bakery apron on.
The officer leading the muster isn't a soldier either. He's the local postmaster, pressed into command by virtue of being the only one who can read a map. He clears his throat, adjusts his cap, and announces that everyone present is now part of the 3rd Volkssturm Battalion, District 7. The title sounds grand. The reality, 60 men, 1 rifle per 3 of them, and a single bicycle that everyone silently agrees will go to whoever survives first contact. 16 to 60, the officer mutters, reading from his clipboard. All patriots of the Reich. He glances at the oldest man in the line, white beard, cane, eyes milky with cataracts, and adds, well, mostly. The group laughs awkwardly. Laughter has become their only defense, the last remnant of humanity before fear turns everyone into machines. You notice a boy standing near the end of the row. His name tag says Kurt, though the letters are smudged. He can't be older than 16. His cheeks are hollow, his eyes fever bright. You ask him where he came from. School, he says simply. They said we'd get medals. His voice wavers between pride and confusion. You nod, but say nothing. Historians still argue whether the Hitler Youth Volunteers of 1945 were victims or zealots. Many joined willingly, taught since childhood that dying for the Führer was nobler than living under defeat. Others were coerced by threats to their families. The truth, as usual, lies somewhere between obedience and fear. The officer begins the inspection. Hands clean, weapons ready, he barks. You glance down. Your weapon is a relic, a Gewehr 98 from 1916. The bolt jams halfway open, and the sling smells of mildew. The man next to you holds an Italian Carcano rifle he can't figure out how to load. Someone else carries an old hunting shotgun. The ammunition boxes are half empty, containing a mismatched assortment of calibers that don't fit any of the guns. Use what you have, the officer says. God will sort the rest. That's the German army now. Faith and improvisation. You march out of the courtyard in ragged formation, boots slapping mud. Civilians watch from their windows, some nodding, others silently closing their shutters. There's no cheering, no music. Just the shuffle of feet and the occasional cough echoing through the morning mist. At the edge of town, you see more of them. Columns of similar units heading toward the front. A patchwork army stitched from whatever fragments remain of a dying empire. Boys in short pants beside veterans with trembling hands, all wearing armbands marked Volkssturm. A quirky historical note. In some regions, local commanders had to scavenge civilian clothing stores for uniforms, dyeing them gray or brown. Others issued only caps or badges. One surviving order from Dresden even instructed tailors to remove decorative buttons from women's coats to outfit Volkssturm men. You imagine the absurdity of that, a man dying in a fur-trimmed overcoat for the glory of the Reich. You pass through a destroyed rail yard. The snow is black with soot. A train car still burns quietly, a low hum of heat radiating from within. Someone makes a joke about the train being bound for Moscow. It's not funny, but everyone laughs anyway. You march until dusk, when the column halts at a farmhouse being used as a supply depot. Inside, a party representative awaits. He wears the brown uniform of the NSDAP, his face flushed with self-importance. He hands out armbands and copies of a pamphlet titled "The Spirit of the People's Storm." You flip through it, patriotic slogans, crude sketches of Soviet soldiers as monsters, and a final paragraph urging each fighter to embrace death with joy. You close it quietly and use it as kindling later that night. Dinner is a bowl of thin potato soup, mostly water. The older men eat in silence. The younger ones try to trade cigarettes for extra bread. You sit beside Kurt, the schoolboy. He shows you a medal his father earned in 1940, a small iron cross on a frayed ribbon. He died near Smolensk, Kurt says. They said I could finish what he started. You want to tell him no one finishes wars like this, but the words don't come. Outside,
Snow starts again, soft, relentless. It covers everything, even the tracks of retreating soldiers you notice behind the farmhouse. The front is collapsing faster than anyone admits. The Volkssturm aren't reinforcing a line. They're plugging holes in a sinking ship. Later, as you stand guard near a ditch, an old man beside you whispers, "I was a soldier once. Real army. Back then, we had purpose." He pauses. "Now, we're just the ashes they forgot to sweep." The wind carries the faint rumble of artillery from the east. You can't tell how far away it is. Maybe 50 kilometers, maybe 10. Sound travels differently when it's carried by fear. Historians debate whether the Volkssturm slowed the Soviet advance at all. Some records show small units fought bravely for days before being annihilated. Others surrendered at the first shot. What's certain is that the program consumed lives faster than it could arm them. Near midnight, a courier arrives from Berlin with new orders. The officer reads them by lamplight. Hold position. Reinforcements en route. He doesn't even pretend to believe it. Reinforcements don't exist anymore. The next morning, the unit moves again. This time not eastward, but in circles, as if marching could fill the void where strategy used to be. You trudge through villages stripped bare of everything. Windows shattered, livestock gone, churches shelled. On a fence, someone has scrawled in chalk, "The war is over. Go home." The message has been half erased, but its truth lingers like a whisper. A man stumbles and falls beside you. He doesn't get up. The officer glances back, then keeps walking. No one says a word. You help the boy Kurt lift the fallen man's rifle. He thanks you with a nod that looks too adult for his years. By afternoon, you reach a river crossing. The bridge ahead is gone, blown up by retreating troops. The men spread out, searching for a place to ford. One wades into the icy water and slips. The current drags him under before anyone can react. For a second, his helmet floats, then disappears. The officer sighs. "Another hero," he says flatly. You wonder when heroism became just another word for drowning. The survivors set up camp on the far bank. The sky burns orange from fires somewhere beyond the horizon. You sit by a makeshift fire, warming your hands, listening to a distant gramophone playing a scratchy waltz. The tune sounds out of place, like a ghost from a better decade. Kurt asks if you think the Führer knows what's happening. You hesitate, then answer honestly. I think he knows everything he wants to. That night, sleep comes in fragments. You dream of parades that never happened, banners fluttering over ruins, and crowds cheering ghosts. When you wake, the snow has stopped. The river glimmers under the pale dawn light, silent and still. You look across the water and imagine all the men who have marched this same path, from victory to delusion. And you realize you're walking through the footnotes of history, the margins no one reads, but everyone remembers in whispers. The boy Kurt shivers beside you, clutching his father's medal. "Will we win?" he asks. You look at the sky, gray and indifferent. "We already didn't," you whisper. You wake to a morning so cold it feels like the air itself has given up. The snow has stopped, but the frost clings to your eyelashes and every breath turns to smoke. The farmhouse you slept in has collapsed halfway during the night, its roof sagging like a tired lung. Someone says the officer is dead. Heart failure, maybe? Or just the body deciding it's had enough of this absurdity. Command passes to a younger man in a Hitler Youth uniform, barely 20, whose voice cracks whenever he shouts. His name is Schulte. He insists they keep training. "We must be ready when the Soviets come," he says, though his hands shake as he unfolds the day's training schedule. 3 hours of drills, 2 hours of weapons instruction, 1 hour of political education. You can't help but smile faintly. Even now, with the front collapsing, they cling to schedules. Bureaucracy survives everything, even the apocalypse. Training begins. You and the others line up in the snow, clutching your mismatched rifles. The instructor, a middle-aged Wehrmacht sergeant with a limp, watches in silence. "Safety off," he says eventually. A few recruits fumble with their weapons, pulling triggers too soon. The shots crack into the air like clumsy punctuation marks.
The sergeant shakes his head. You'll hit the sun before you hit a tank.
Historians still debate how much training the Volkssturm actually received. Officially, each man was promised at least 4 weeks of preparation. In reality, many units drilled for only 2 or 3 days, sometimes a few hours. Ammunition shortages made live-fire practice nearly impossible, so instead, instructors emphasized discipline, obedience, and slogans. Cheap fuel for empty rifles. You remember the morning's lesson: how to stand at attention, how to salute, how to die quietly. The sergeant walks past you, his limp dragging through the snow like punctuation at the end of a sentence. The key, he says, is not to panic. If you panic, you die. He pauses, smirks, and adds, if you don't panic, you also die, but slower. The men laugh, a dry, brittle sound that steams in the cold air. Humor is oxygen here. Without it, everyone would suffocate. During a break, you gather around a fire made of old desks. Kurt, the schoolboy, is rubbing his hands together, trying to warm his fingers. When will we fight? He asks. Soon, you answer, though soon could mean anything, tomorrow or never. One of the older recruits, a man named Behrens, pulls a flask from his coat and offers it around. To the Reich, he says sarcastically. Then, softer, to home. Everyone drinks to that one. In the afternoon, training resumes. Your march through obstacle courses made of debris. The sergeant yells until his voice cracks, forcing men to crawl under barbed wire scavenged from a bombed factory fence. One man gets his coat caught and starts swearing. Another simply lies still, staring at the sky, as if the effort isn't worth the breath. Later, the party representative arrives, a thin, rat-like man with round spectacles and a briefcase full of papers. He introduces himself as Herr Muller, district political officer. Comrades, he says, his tone clipped and theatrical. Our greatest weapon is not the Panzerfaust, but faith. He pulls a pistol from his belt and waves it dramatically. Faith, he repeats. You almost expect applause. Instead, the men stare at him with hollow eyes. Herr Muller lectures for an hour about the sacred duty of defending the fatherland. He quotes Hitler, then Goebbels, then himself. Our enemies think we are weak, he declares, but the German spirit cannot be defeated. He doesn't notice that half his audience has drifted away, tending fires or adjusting frozen boots. Historians still argue how much people truly believed in this rhetoric by 1945. Some evidence suggests many Germans were still convinced the war could turn, especially after hearing about miracle weapons and secret armies. Others describe a population exhausted into obedience, too afraid to hope, too scared to rebel. After the lecture, Muller tries to demonstrate the Panzerfaust. He points it toward a wrecked truck, shouting, "Watch and learn." He pulls the trigger. Nothing happens. He pulls again, harder. Still nothing. Then the sergeant steps forward, gently removes the safety cap, and mutters, "Try now." The weapon fires, blasting the truck apart. Muller stumbles backward into the snow, coughing through the smoke. The men burst out laughing for the first time all day. "See?" the sergeant says. "Faith works better with safety off." That night, you sit by the fire again, watching sparks drift into the black sky. The stars are gone, hidden behind the haze of distant fires. You ask Behrens where he fought before. "France, 1940, he says, back when uniforms matched and orders made sense. He stares into the flames. Now it's like someone's running the war from a dream. He's right. The entire Reich feels like a hallucination now. Posters still shouting about victory while trains carry refugees west. Cities burn and the soldiers of yesterday rot in forgotten trenches. The propaganda keeps talking long after the country has stopped listening. At dawn, a rumor spreads that Soviet tanks have reached Kustrin, only 60 kilometers away. Panic ripples through the camp. Schulte tries to restore order, shouting that reinforcements are coming. No one believes him. The sergeant shrugs. Then we'll give them a warm welcome.
Training stops. The recruits are told to dig trenches along the nearby road. The ground is frozen solid, and the spades break easily. One man cuts his hand on the handle and curses. Blood freezes before it drips. By midday, the trenches are barely knee-deep. A supply wagon arrives. Finally. But instead of food or ammunition, it carries bundles of armbands, party leaflets, and 2 loudspeakers. Mueller sets them up immediately, broadcasting patriotic songs that echo off the hills like a mockery. As the music drones on, you catch sight of a small sign nailed to a post near the road. To the front. The arrow points east. Someone has scrawled under it in chalk, "To hell."
Kurt reads it, then laughs. "At least it's honest," he says. That evening, the sergeant calls the men together. His tone is quieter now, almost gentle. "If you see tanks," he says, "don't fire until they're close. Aim low, wait for the tracks, then run. Don't be a hero."
He looks around at the tired faces. Heroes are just dead men with better publicity.
A few chuckles. Even Mueller smiles, missing the insult.
You can't shake the sense that everyone here knows what's coming. The training, the speeches, the posters, it's all theater. The real performance begins when the Soviets arrive, and it ends when the curtain drops on all of you. That night, the wind howls through the broken farmhouse. You sleep beside Kurt and Barons, sharing a blanket that smells of smoke. The firelight flickers across the walls, turning the shadows into ghosts. You dream of parades again, children waving flags, brass bands, sunlight on helmets. But the scene dissolves into gray snow and silence. When you wake before dawn, the music from Mueller's loudspeakers is still playing. The record has been looping for hours. It skips every few seconds on the same lyric. Deutschland, erwache. Germany, awaken. You stare at the horizon, the faintest red glow hinting at the east. And you realize Germany has awakened, but only into a nightmare it can't escape. By the 3rd week of your service, the word training becomes a joke no one bothers to finish. You already know what each day brings: cold rations, colder wind, and weapons so ancient they belong in museums. The rifles jam, the grenades misfire, and the ammunition boxes are mostly empty. Somewhere, in a warm bunker hundreds of kilometers away, a bureaucrat is likely marking you down as combat ready. The morning begins with a routine inspection. Sergeant Barons, the only man who still carries himself like a real soldier, limps through the rows. "Show me your rifles," he says. You raise the old Gewehr 98, its bolt sticky with frozen oil. He squints, nods once, and moves on. The boy Kurt fumbles his weapon, nearly dropping it in the snow. Barons sighs. "Son, if you can't shoot straight, at least throw it hard." The men laugh quietly, though the sound feels more like fatigue than humor. Then comes the ammunition issue. Mueller, the party officer, rolls in with a handcart filled with mismatched crates. "Supplies from Berlin," he announces triumphantly. When the boxes are opened, you find a collection of old hunting cartridges, loose pistol rounds, and a single box of rifle bullets, all different calibers. Someone mutters, "The Soviets should surrender immediately. We'll confuse them to death." You receive 10 bullets that don't fit your rifle. Mueller tells you to hold them anyway. It would be funny if it weren't true. Historians have since called this phase of the war Waffen Chaos, weapon chaos. The Volkssturm used anything they could find: captured French rifles, Czech submachine guns, Italian carbines, and even First World War artillery hauled out of storage. Ammunition seldom matched. Logistics had collapsed. The only thing consistent was confusion. You sling the rifle over your shoulder and join the others on a patrol, though no one knows what you're patrolling for. The roads are empty, except for stray dogs and burnt wagons. Occasionally, you pass a dead horse, frozen stiff, its eyes glazed white like porcelain marbles. Kurt looks away each time. "I used to ride horses," he says softly. You don't reply. At midday, You reach a village that looks abandoned. Doors hang open, laundry still frozen on the lines. Inside one house, a gramophone plays a waltz on a loop, the needle stuck halfway through. Someone had left in a hurry, or maybe never left at all. Barons orders a search for supplies. You check cupboards, drawers, even under beds. The shelves are bare except for a single jar of pickles and a dented tin of coffee. You pocket the coffee, pretending not to see Kurt's disappointed glance. Outside, Mueller is inspecting the street with exaggerated seriousness, his pistol gleaming. "See," he says to no one in particular. "Still German soil. Still ours." You wonder how long he's been lying to himself. A quirky detail surfaces in your mind. Rumors that some Volkssturm units used medieval weapons during shortages. Maces, pikes, even crossbows from museums. It sounds absurd, but you've already seen worse. Somewhere in the West, one unit reportedly fought with antique cannons from a local monument. The past, it seems, has been drafted too. You hear distant artillery again, muffled by snow. Each blast sounds closer. Behrens listens carefully, counting seconds between the thuds. "They're moving faster than the newspapers admit," he mutters. Mueller snaps at him. "The Führer has plans. You'll see. New weapons, secret divisions." Behrens just grins wearily. "Good. Maybe they'll bring us socks." That afternoon, you're ordered to fortify the town square. You drag furniture into piles, overturn carts, and fill sandbags with soil that's half ice. It feels less like defense and more like ritual, a way to pretend control still exists. Kurt paints a crude swastika on one barricade, his brush trembling from the cold. "For luck," he says. You want to tell him luck ran out months ago, but the words stay frozen on your tongue. When the sun sets, the temperature drops to something cruel. The fires are small, fuel is scarce. You sit with a group of men around a broken stove, trying to warm your hands. Someone tells a joke about how the Reich promised them glory but delivered arthritis. Another laughs so hard he starts coughing blood. Behrens passes you the flask again. It's almost empty now. "Drink," he says. "Tomorrow we might not have the time." You drink, and it burns like memory. Sometime after midnight, a vehicle approaches. A battered truck carrying supplies. The headlights cut through the fog, and everyone scrambles to see what's arrived. The driver jumps out, grinning. "Weapons delivery," he shouts. The back is open to reveal crates labeled Panzerfausts. For a moment, there's genuine excitement. Finally, something powerful, something real. The men crowd around as Behrens demonstrates how to use one. "Point it, fire it, then run like hell," he explains. "You get one shot. Make it count." Each man takes one, cradling it like a sacred relic. Even Kurt gets one, though it's nearly as long as he is tall. "Don't aim too high," Behrens warns. "You'll take out the clouds before the tank." Historians note that the Panzerfaust was both brilliant and tragic, cheap, effective, and suicidal. It gave civilians a weapon capable of killing tanks, but required them to stand within range of being crushed by them. It was Germany's last magic trick, turning ordinary men into disposable miracles. As dawn breaks, you see smoke on the horizon. The Soviets are closer. Mueller insists the fight will be glorious, that the Führer himself will reward your courage. His words drift over the group like snow, white, empty, and melting before they land. Behrens lights a cigarette and murmurs, "If courage paid rent, we'd own Berlin." Then, the first artillery shell hits. The explosion rips through a house at the edge of the village, splintering wood and sending a rain of bricks into the street. The men scatter instinctively, diving for cover. You taste dust, metal, and fear all at once. More shells follow, thudding in rhythm like a monstrous heartbeat. One hits the church tower, the bell crashes down, ringing once before shattering. Smoke pours across the rooftops. "Positions!" Behrens shouts, voice raw. You grab your rifle, duck behind a wall, and peer through the haze. Shadows move beyond the far fields, Soviet troops, small figures at first, growing larger. Kurt crouches beside you, gripping his Panzerfaust. His knuckles are white.
Do I shoot now? He whispers.
Wait, you say. Wait until you can smell them. It's a cruel joke, but he doesn't laugh. The Soviets advance methodically, their silhouettes flickering through the smoke. Someone opens fire too early. The crack of rifle shots rings out, mostly missing their mark. You pull the trigger once. Click. Jammed. You slam the bolt. Try again. Nothing. Your antique weapon has decided the war's over. You grab a Panzerfaust instead, aim shakily toward a shape that might be a tank, and fire. The blast knocks you backward. The projectile streaks out, explodes near the edge of the road. You can't tell if it hit anything, but the sound alone is terrifying enough to make you feel briefly alive. When the smoke clears, the Soviets are closer. You see their faces now, grim, determined, just as tired as yours. You realize none of you belong here anymore. Behrens shouts something, but the artillery drowns him out. You look to your right. Kurt is still kneeling, the empty Panzerfaust smoking beside him. His expression is blank. "Reload!" you yell, though there's nothing to reload with. He just stares ahead, lips moving. You catch the words barely audible. "For my father." Then he runs forward. The flash is instant, blinding. When your vision returns, the street is empty except for the smoke. You know he won't be coming back. The shelling stops as suddenly as it began. The silence that follows feels worse than noise. Somewhere, a dog howls. Muller is gone. Behrens leans against a wall, face gray with exhaustion. "Well," he says hoarsely, "that was our glorious stand." You nod, unable to speak. The village is half gone now, and so are half your men. The barricades burn quietly, casting long shadows across the snow. You look down at your useless rifle and think about how strange it is that something so small, metal, wood, rust, has carried so many people to their deaths. In the distance, the Red Army keeps moving west. You can hear the rumble of engines and wonder if Berlin still stands, if the Führer is still shouting at maps that no longer matter. Behrens lights another cigarette, the flame trembling in the wind. "You ever wonder," he says, "what the last sound of a dying empire makes?" You listen. It's the crackle of fire, the creak of collapsing timber, and the faint echo of a song still skipping on Miller's broken loudspeaker. Deutschland, Erwache. But Germany is asleep now, deep, dreamless, and cold. When the shelling ends, the snow begins again, soft, almost merciful. The flakes drift down through smoke, coating rubble like bandages on open wounds. The sky has no color anymore. It's just a sheet of gray where the sun once lived. You stand beside the ruins of the church, ears ringing, breath ghosting in the cold air. The world smells of cordite and wet ash. Behrens is crouched near the steps, trying to rewrap a bandage around his arm. His coat sleeve is torn, revealing a long gash that leaks through the cloth. You kneel beside him. "It's shallow," he grunts. The shell was polite enough to miss. He tries to smile, but it falters halfway. Across the square, a few men dig through the debris for survivors. The bodies they find are still warm. One of them turns out to be the party officer, Muller. His spectacles are missing, his mouth open in a kind of surprised "oh," as if even in death he hadn't expected consequences. Someone mutters, "Finally stop talking." No one laughs this time. You wander toward what used to be the town hall. A Soviet shell has split the building in half, revealing rooms like a dollhouse. You can see the mayor's office on the second floor, desk still upright, map of Germany hanging, lopsided, behind it. The red pins that once marked defensive positions are scattered across the floor like spilled blood. You pick one up and pocket it. A souvenir of delusion. There's a low murmur in the air, the sound of engines approaching. You look east and see the shimmer of movement on the horizon. Soviet reconnaissance vehicles, moving cautiously. The fight is over here, but war hasn't learned how to stop walking. Behrens joins you, wiping dust from his beard. "They won't waste time," he says. "They'll just pass through." He looks around at the shattered village. Nothing left to take. He's wrong. The Soviets will still take fuel, shelter, dignity. They've earned the right through suffering, but that doesn't make it cleaner. You've heard the rumors from refugees. What happens when the Red Army reaches a German town? The revenge of the East for everything stolen, burned, and broken. You pass a sign nailed to a doorframe. No soldiers here, only civilians. The irony stings. Everyone's a soldier now, whether they volunteered or not. As night falls, the survivors gather in the cellar beneath the bakery. The air is thick with smoke from the stove, and the light flickers weakly. There are maybe 20 of you left, half wounded, all starving. No one mentions Kurt, though his absence fills the room like a ghost that refuses to sit down. Behrens divides the last can of soup into chipped mugs. Someone proposes a toast to making it through the day. Another voice adds, and to no more speeches. That gets a quiet laugh. You sip your share. It's barely more than warm water with a hint of potato, but it tastes like something sacred. Every swallow feels like an act of defiance. A quirky historical note floats into your mind. Some Volkssturm units had carried slogans on their flags, freedom or death. Others simply wrote, "Here we stand." Most of those flags were later found folded neatly in attics, never used. In some ways, those men had achieved both freedom and death at once. Freedom from illusion, death of everything else. The door creaks open. A young woman enters, wrapped in a coat far too large for her. She's local, probably hiding through the fighting. She says the Soviets have reached the next village. They're coming by morning, she whispers. You should go. No one moves. There's nowhere to go. Behrens leans back against the wall. Then morning it is, he mutters. Let them find us seated. Maybe they'll think we surrendered gracefully. You lie down on the cold floorboards, listening to the slow. At dawn, you climb out of the cellar. Then, faintly, the sound of engines again. Closer this time. The first Soviet scout car rolls down the main street, its machine gun swiveling lazily. A few infantrymen follow, rifles at the ready. Their faces are blank, unreadable, framed by scarves and snow. You raise your hands slowly. Behrens does the same beside you. The soldiers pause, exchange a few words, then motion for you to stay put. One of them shouts something in Russian. You don't understand, but the tone is clear. Don't move, don't speak, don't exist more than necessary. For a moment it feels like peace, but it isn't peace. It's just the pause between endings. They move through the village methodically, checking houses, collecting weapons. One of them finds your useless rifle, picks it up, inspects it, and laughs. He tosses it into the snow. Another searches Muller's body and pockets the pistol. The gesture is practical, not cruel. Even conquerors recycle. When the search is done, the Soviets line you up in the square. An officer steps forward, a tall man with dark eyes, his uniform worn from years of mud and frost. He studies you for a moment, then says in broken German, "You fought?" You nod. He exhales slowly, almost pitying. "You are lucky. War finished soon." He gestures toward the west. "Berlin. That's where the last storm waits." Behrens whispers, "Lucky." The word tastes strange in his mouth. The officer waves his men forward. They hand out small pieces of bread. Hard, stale, but real. You take yours and feel the absurdity of it all. Surviving a war only to be fed by the enemy. Historians would later call this moment the disarmament of illusion. Across the crumbling Reich, Volkssturm units were surrendering en masse. Some melted into the countryside. Others handed over their weapons to the Allies. Only the most fanatic fought on, often shot in alleys or burned out of barns. As the Soviets move on, you sit down on the steps of the church. The bread tastes dry, but it's enough to remind you you're still alive. Behrens lights one of his last cigarettes and passes it to you. "So," he says, "what do we do now?" You shrug. "Wait for orders that never come." He laughs softly. "We've been doing that since 1941. You both stare at the snow-covered ruins. Somewhere in the distance, a Soviet soldier is singing. Low, melancholy, beautiful. You can't make out the words, but the melody feels older than war. It drifts through the empty streets, a requiem for everyone, German or otherwise. The girl who warned you earlier appears again. She stands beside the broken fountain, holding a small candle. My brother fought in the east, she says quietly. He never came back. You nod, not knowing what to say. There are no condolences left that mean anything. She looks toward the horizon. Do you think the world will forgive us? Behrens answers for you. The world doesn't forgive, it forgets. Slowly. The three of you stand there for a while, watching the Soviets disappear into the mist. The sound of engines fades until it's just the wind again, brushing through the hollow shells of buildings. You realize something then, an uncomfortable truth. You've spent so long fighting to defend a Germany that no longer exists that you've forgotten what it meant in the first place. The snow keeps falling. It covers the wreckage, the blood, even Mueller's body. Soon the whole village will look clean again, like a white sheet pulled over a corpse. Behrens stands, stretching his sore leg. We should bury the boy, he says finally. You nod. Together you walk to the edge of town where Kurt fell. His Panzerfaust still lies half buried in the snow. The blast left a small crater, blackened around the edges. You dig a shallow grave nearby. When the work is done, Behrens removes his cap. For all the fathers and sons who believed, he says. You add, quietly, and for all who stopped believing too late. The wind rises again, carrying the sound of distant thunder, not from a storm, but from the guns outside Berlin. The final act of the Reich is beginning, somewhere beyond your sight. You turn away from the grave, hands numb, stomach hollow, heart heavier than the earth you just shoveled. The girl lingers behind, placing the candle on the mound. Its flame wavers, then steadies. For the first time in weeks, you feel something that almost resembles peace. Not victory, just stillness. As you walk back toward the silent village, Behrens mutters, "The party wanted soldiers. They got survivors instead." And for once, the world seems content with that. You stay in that ruined village for 2 more days. No orders come, no rescue, no explanation. Only the snow and the wind, which seem to whisper the same thing over and over. It's over. On the morning of the 3rd day, Behrens decides you should move west. Berlin's finished, he says. If we're lucky, we'll find Americans instead of Russians. He's limping worse now, but he insists on leading. The girl, the one with the candle, chooses to stay. This is my home, she says softly. You envy her conviction, though home is just a word now, stripped of walls and warmth. You pack what you can. A stale loaf of bread, a dented flask, and the broken rifle you still carry out of habit. Before leaving, you glance back once more at Kurt's grave. The snow has almost buried the candle completely, its faint glow smothered, but not gone. The road west is a ghostly corridor of silence. Frozen fields stretch on both sides, dotted with wreckage. Overturned carts, burnt trucks, the occasional body frozen mid-crawl. The faces are peaceful now, war's only mercy. Behrens hums under his breath to keep rhythm. The tune is familiar, one of those pre-war love songs people used to dance to when the world still had time for music. Remember the cafes? He asks suddenly. Berlin, 1938. Smoke, piano, girls with ribbons in their hair. He smiles wistfully, then stops himself. Feels like another planet. You nod. A planet that got hit by an asteroid. Historians would later say that by April 1945, the German heartland was like an archaeological site. Layer after layer of propaganda, rubble, and denial. The Volkssturm had been meant to unify the nation one last time. Instead, it scattered it completely. The army, the party, the people, each fractured into fragments, all pretending to be whole. As the day wears on, you encounter a few other stragglers, 2 Wehrmacht soldiers without insignia, an old farmer pushing a wheelbarrow filled with blankets, and a woman carrying a baby that doesn't cry. You all fall into step together without speaking, a silent procession moving through the graveyard of Europe. In the distance, the sound of gunfire flickers, sporadic, weak. The Soviets must be mopping up resistance ahead. You keep walking, guided more by instinct than destination. Every village looks the same now. Roofs gone, chimneys leaning,
church bells lying shattered in the street.
You pass a field where cows wander unattended, ribs showing through their hides. A half-burned signpost reads, "To Berlin." Someone has painted over it in black, "Don't."
By sunset, you reach another town, larger than the last, but just as dead. Smoke rises from chimneys, but it's only from fires set to clear debris. The air smells faintly of burning paper. You realize it's books, whole crates of them, being thrown into the flames by what's left of the local party office.
Behrens frowns. "Even now," he mutters, "they're still censoring ghosts."
A young man in a tattered SS uniform stands by the fire, tossing volumes one by one. He looks barely 20. When he sees you, he raises his pistol. "Who are you?"
"No one," Behrens says. "Just done with the war."
The youth's hand trembles. He hesitates, then lowers the gun. "You can't quit," he says weakly. "The Fuhrer forbids it."
Behrens steps closer. "And where is he then? Maybe he'll come arrest us himself."
The boy's lips move as if to answer, but no words come. Finally, he throws the pistol into the fire and walks away without another sound. The flames swallow it with a hiss. You both watch until the last of the books turn to ash. You wonder what stories died there. Poems, fairy tales, manuals, lies. Maybe all the same thing by now. You spend the night in the shell of an old tavern. The sign above the door still reads, "Zum Adler," the eagle. Inside, the smell of beer and smoke lingers faintly beneath the dust. You find a few unbroken bottles behind the counter, their labels faded. Behrens opens one and pours a small measure into tin cups. "To peace," he says, then adds dryly, "whenever it feels like showing up." You drink in silence. The alcohol burns, but it warms. Later, as the fire crackles in the stove, Behrens begins talking, not about battles or orders, but about before. "I was a carpenter," he says. "I built tables, doors, cabinets, things that lasted." He looks around at the shattered timbers of the tavern. "Now everything I built is gone. The war turned my hands into tools for breaking instead of making." You tell him you used to be a teacher. "History," you add. He chuckles softly. "So you saw this coming, didn't you?" "Not like this," you say. "History used to feel far away, safe." He nods. "History's only safe until it starts breathing down your neck." A long silence follows. Outside, the wind howls through the ruins, carrying the faint echo of a far-off explosion. You think of all the people still fighting somewhere, on the Oder, in the forests, in the streets of Berlin, each convinced they're defending something real. You wake before dawn to a strange calm. The air is colder than ever, but the horizon glows faintly pink. Behrens is already awake, sitting near the window. "Snow stopped," he says. "We should move." You pack up and head west again. The roads are emptier now, though you occasionally spot columns of refugees trudging the same direction. Some push carts, others carry nothing but blankets and hope. At a crossroads, you meet an old woman walking alone, barefoot despite the frost. Her face is windburned, her expression serene. She stops you and asks, "Is it true? Is Hitler dead?" You hesitate. "We don't know." She nods. "Then it's probably true," and keeps walking. You continue on until noon when you reach a bridge spanning a half-frozen river. It's guarded by German soldiers, real ones this time, wearing Wehrmacht coats and steel helmets. A sign hangs from the rail, "Civilians cross at your own risk." An officer stops you. His uniform is neat, though his eyes are hollow. "No one crosses," he says. "Orders." Behrens steps forward. "Whose orders?" The officer hesitates. "Whose? I don't even know anymore." He looks down at his boots. There's no chain of command left, just men waiting for permission to surrender. A shot rings out nearby, a single, distant crack. Everyone flinches, but no one reacts. It could be anything now. Execution, suicide, or accident. The three sounds have become indistinguishable. Eventually, the officer sighs and waves you through. "Go on," he says quietly. "Just keep walking until you don't hear the guns anymore." You cross the bridge slowly. On the other side,
The road slopes downward into a valley dusted with snow. For a moment, you let yourself imagine you're just two travelers, not remnants of an empire. At the bottom of the hill stands a farmhouse, half collapsed but still smoking from its chimney. A woman appears at the door, cautious but not afraid. She offers you soup, thin but hot. You thank her, and she shakes her head. "I've been feeding everyone who passes," she says. "Soon I'll run out." Behrens gives her his last cigarette in return. She smiles faintly, almost shy. "Keep moving," she tells you. "The world's changing faster than people can hide from it." That night, you camp near a ruined barn. The sky above is clear for once, filled with cold, distant stars. You lie on your back, staring up. Behrens mutters, "Feels strange to see them again." You agree. For months, the world has been nothing but smoke. After a long pause, he asks, "You ever think we'll be remembered?" You shake your head. "Not us, just the ruins." He nods slowly. "Good. The ruins deserve it more." The wind rustles through the fields, carrying the smell of wood smoke and thawing earth. Somewhere far away, you think you hear church bells. Maybe real this time, not just the echo of artillery. For the first time, you don't flinch. And though the night is still cold and cruel, you sense something shifting. A quiet truth buried beneath the wreckage. Survival, fragile and unremarkable, but alive. When you wake the next morning, the frost has melted just enough to turn the earth into a thin layer of mud. You and Behrens trudge onward, boots squelching with every step. The road is lined with burned wagons, dead horses, and the occasional helmet lying upside down like a rusted bowl. You stop counting after the 10th. By now, there are more refugees than soldiers. Columns of civilians shuffle past in both directions, some heading west toward the Americans, others east, desperate to find missing relatives. The air is filled with coughing, muttering, the squeak of wheels that have forgotten how to turn. Everyone moves like sleepwalkers. A small boy, no older than 8, walks beside a woman carrying a bundle wrapped in blankets. "Is Papa there?" he asks. She doesn't answer. After a moment, the bundle shifts, and you realize it isn't luggage. It's an infant, still and silent. The mother keeps walking. You glance at Behrens. His jaw tightens, but he says nothing. There are no words left that can fit inside this kind of world. By midday, you reach a crossroads where a wooden sign has been nailed to a post. It reads simply, "Berlin, 70 kilometers." Someone has drawn an arrow below it, pointing down into the mud, as if Berlin has already sunk beneath the earth. Historians often note that by late April, the German landscape had become one long funeral march, a geography of surrender. Roads clogged with refugees, armies retreating without orders, towns changing hands twice in a day. You can feel it in your bones now, a country unraveling in slow motion. As the sun climbs higher, the road splits through a pine forest. The trees are blackened at the trunks, but their tops are still green, a strange kind of defiance. The wind rattles the branches, scattering charred needles across your path. Somewhere nearby, you hear gunfire again, brief and erratic, then silence. "Bandits," Behrens mutters, "or what's left of the SS." You've heard the rumors too. Scattered SS units, refusing to surrender, now roam the countryside, executing deserters and traitors. They call themselves Werewolf, werewolves, Hitler's final fantasy. The first mention of it had come months earlier, back when the Volkssturm was still a promise, not a eulogy. Goebbels had spoken of it on the radio. "Even if our cities fall, the spirit of Germany will strike back from the shadows." He promised an army of saboteurs, assassins, patriots who would haunt the occupiers for years. You'd laughed when you first heard it. Who wouldn't? The idea of grandmothers and teenage boys sneaking behind Allied lines with dynamite in their pockets sounded more like a bedtime story than a strategy. But now, wandering through this forest, you start to wonder. Bedtime stories have a way of coming true when the world loses its mind. A rustle breaks the quiet. You freeze. Behrens raises his hand. From behind a tree, a figure steps out. A man in a ragged SS coat, his face smeared with soot, his rifle slung low. He looks at you both with bloodshot eyes. "Paper," he says flatly. Behrens shows his identification, though it's barely legible anymore. The man studies it, then frowns. Volkssturm was, Baron says. War's over, not for us. The man grins, teeth yellow. We are the werewolves. We will never surrender. You feel a chill colder than the wind. You'll die, you say quietly. He shrugs. Then we'll die German. Historians still argue whether the werewolf movement was ever real or just propaganda. Some attacks did happen, assassinations, sabotaged rail lines, but most evidence suggests chaos, not coordination. Still, the myth served its purpose. It kept fear alive, long after the guns went silent. The man stares at you for a long time, then lowers his rifle. Go west, he says, before we change our minds. You don't wait to see if he's joking. Once you're far enough, Barons exhales. Werewolves, he mutters. Fairy tales for men who can't face the morning. Fairy tales can still kill you, you reply. He nods. So can mornings. You keep walking until the trees thin out and the forest opens into a wide field. Smoke rises from the far edge, thin, gray, and steady. You approach cautiously, half expecting another checkpoint. Instead, you find a group of farmers clearing rubble around a barn. They look at you with suspicion, then relief. Refugees? One asks. Something like that, Baron says. They share their fire and a pot of stew that smells faintly of cabbage. One of the men tells you the news spreading from the east. Hitler is dead, shot himself in Berlin. Goebbels too, they say, and the rest scattered like rats. You expect to feel something. Shock, relief, anger. But all you feel is tired. Barons pokes at the fire with a stick. So that's it, he murmurs. The man who promised 1,000 years didn't even make it to 56. The farmers nod grimly. One adds, the Americans are near Leipzig. The Russians are already in Berlin. It's finished. You stare into the flames, watching them twist and collapse. Finished. The word sounds like freedom and failure all at once. Later that night, one of the farmers leads you to a hayloft to sleep. The straw smells damp but clean. You lie there, staring at the rafters. The wind seeps through the gaps, whispering like a lullaby sung by ghosts. Barons turns over beside you. When this is really done, he says softly, what happens to people like us? You don't answer right away. We rebuild, you say finally. Or we disappear. Disappear sounds easier. You both laugh quietly. The sound's small but real. Before you sleep, you think about the werewolves again. The men hiding in forests, convinced they could still scare the world into obedience. Maybe they weren't all mad. Maybe some of them just couldn't face silence. After years of orders and shouting, silence feels like falling through air with no ground below. In the early hours, you wake to distant gunfire again. Only a few bursts this time, then nothing. You wonder if the werewolves have found another target, or if someone has finally hunted them down. When dawn breaks, the farmers are already gone, tending their fields as if nothing has changed. Barons and you share the last of the bread, then shoulder your packs. As you step back onto the road, you spot something strange on a fence post. A small sign, crudely painted, showing a wolf's head. Beneath it, the word Rosh, revenge. You tear it down without thinking. The wood splinters under your hands. Barons looks at you. Superstitious now? Just tired of ghosts. You walk west again, through a countryside, trying to remember how to be alive. The birds have started returning. Hesitant at first, then louder. The snow is gone, the mud thick but thawing. By afternoon, you reach a hill overlooking a valley dotted with smoke from cooking fires. The fields below are full of people, families, soldiers, prisoners, all moving like ants across the open ground. The war machine has stopped, but the human tide keeps flowing. Barons squints. Looks like the whole country's migrating. You nod. Maybe it is. Historians would later write about this mass movement, the millions displaced, wandering through the wreckage of the Reich. But standing there, you realize it's not just bodies migrating. It's guilt, memory, belief itself, all shuffling west, searching for somewhere to hide. Barons lights his last match, watching the flame tremble. You think anyone will learn from all this? You smile faintly. History teachers always hope so. And you're still a teacher? Always will be, you say. Even if the classroom burned down. He laughs softly. Then maybe I'll build you a new one. You keep walking as the sun dips low, painting the sky orange and red. The color is beautiful, almost like fire, but this time it doesn't burn. For the first time since Berlin fell, you let yourself imagine a future. Not glorious, not triumphant, just possible. And as the light fades, you realize that survival itself has become the only victory left worth having. You reach the outskirts of another ruined town by dusk, a cluster of scorched rooftops and crooked chimneys, the bones of a place that once had a name. No signs remain, no maps, no borders, just the vague hum of human noise carried on the wind. Coughing, hammering, quiet voices that sound afraid to be loud. A wooden cart creaks past you. The man pulling it is barefoot, his hands wrapped in rags. Behind him, two children stare at you with the solemnity of old men. Behrens gives them a half smile. The smallest one waves, then hides behind her father. The gesture is both shy and ancient, the kind you see in paintings of peasants greeting travelers in centuries long gone. You pass a square where a fountain once stood. It's now a crater filled with dirty water and the reflection of a sky that can't decide what color it wants to be. On the far side, a handful of men are stacking bricks, rebuilding something. Maybe a wall, maybe their own sanity. You ask one what they're working on. Whatever's left, he says. That's the whole country now. Whatever's left. Behrens stops in front of what used to be a shop. The sign is scorched, but you can still make out the faded letters, Bäckerei. He steps inside and returns with a cracked wooden spoon. For souvenirs, he says, tucking it into his coat. Something ordinary, something that survived. Inside another building, you find a poster still clinging to the wall. Victory through sacrifice. It declares in bold Gothic print. Below it, someone has scrawled in charcoal, "We sacrificed everything." Where's the victory? Historians will later call this period the vacuum, the strange, echoing pause between collapse and occupation. Power dissolves overnight. The Wehrmacht is gone. The SS scattered. The party evaporated like smoke. Yet in that silence, a strange instinct remains. To keep moving, to keep pretending structure exists. You and Behrens settle for the night in the corner of a collapsed warehouse. The floor is cold and smells faintly of oil. Through the gaps in the wall, you can see the faint glow of fires, people cooking, warming, mourning. Behrens tears a piece of stale bread in half and passes it to you. When I was a kid, he says, I used to think bread was boring, too plain. Now it's a feast. You chew slowly. The crust is like stone, but it's food, and that's enough. A group of people arrive at the warehouse door. A man in a tattered Wehrmacht coat, a woman holding a baby, and a teenage girl clutching a wicker basket. They ask to share the shelter. Behrens nods immediately. Soon, the space fills with the sound of soft breathing and the occasional whimper from the baby. No one asks names. Names don't matter anymore. Everyone is just someone who made it through the night before. The woman hums a lullaby, low, familiar, and heartbreakingly normal. You close your eyes, letting the melody carry you back years. Summer air, open windows, the faint smell of baking bread, the sound of radio chatter about victories that once seemed certain. Then it fades, and you're back among ruins again. Sometime near midnight, Behrens stirs. You hear that? He whispers. At first it's faint, metallic clinks, steady footsteps, voices speaking foreign words. Then the light appears. Torches, 5 or 6 of them, bobbing like fireflies down the street. You peer through the crack in the wall. A column of Soviet soldiers marches past, rifles slung, faces unreadable. One glances toward the warehouse but doesn't stop. When they're gone, Behrens exhales. They don't even see us anymore, he says. We're ghosts in their new world. You think of all the empires that once ruled this soil. Prussia, the Kaiserreich, the Reich. All gone, each believing itself eternal. Now the men outside are the new conquerors, and one day they'll be ghosts too. History doesn't stop. It just changes uniforms. You wake at dawn to the sound of hammers. The men across the square are still rebuilding. Their tools echo through the cold morning like heartbeats. You join them, wordlessly at first, stacking bricks and clearing debris. It feels good to move for something that isn't destruction. A young man beside you wipes his brow and says, "We're fixing the school." You raise an eyebrow. "Anyone left to teach?" He shrugs. "Not yet, but maybe someone will come." You smile faintly. Maybe you will. Later, Behrens finds an abandoned workshop behind the warehouse. Inside, a handful of tools, a saw, a hammer, a plane coated in dust. He picks up the hammer like an old friend. "You see," he says, "even in hell, there's wood to work." He spends the afternoon fixing a window frame while you help repair the roof. The work is clumsy but honest. Each nail driven feels like an apology whispered to the past. Historians would later remark how, in those weeks after the Reich's fall, ordinary Germans began rebuilding without orders, clearing streets, reopening bakeries, setting up soup kitchens. It wasn't ideology anymore. It was instinct, the human version of breathing. When the sun sets, the square glows with small fires. People sit together, sharing food and silence. You sit beside Behrens, listening to the murmur of new beginnings stitched from the same fabric as old wounds. Then a woman speaks. She's middle-aged, wearing a scarf over her hair. "They say in Berlin," she begins, "the Führer shot himself. His people burned his body." Her voice trembles, but she doesn't sound surprised. Imagine that. All those speeches about honor, and it ends with smoke and gasoline. Behrens pokes the fire. "Maybe that's what he always was," he says. "Smoke and gasoline." No one answers. The fire crackles, throwing shadows across tired faces. You glance toward the ruined school. The windows are half repaired. The roof still leaks. Yet, for the first time, it looks like a building again, not just debris. Behrens notices your gaze. "Tomorrow," he says, "we finish the roof. Then maybe build a door." You nod. "A door's a start." That night, you lie awake, staring at the faint stars through the broken rafters. You think of Kurt and the old man Schmidt, of Mueller and his loudspeakers, of the werewolves hiding in the forests. You wonder if any of them would recognize this new world being born from the ashes, or if they'd try to kill it out of habit. Sleep comes slowly. In your dreams, you're back in Berlin before the fall. The streets are full of light and noise, parades and banners. Then one by one, the lights flicker out, leaving only the sound of footsteps fading into snow. When you wake, the morning is quiet. Behrens is already up, hammering at a plank of wood. The sound is rhythmic, steady, alive. You realize it's the first time you've heard that sound, the sound of creation, since the war began. You sit beside him, passing nails, holding boards. After a while, he pauses and grins. "You know," he says, "I think I like peace better." "Bit duller," you reply. He chuckles. "Good. I could use dull." The roof beam creaks into place. Dust drifts through the morning light. For a second, it looks like snow again, but this time, it doesn't sting. It just glitters. In that moment, the enormity of everything hits you. The death, the delusion, the wasted courage, all of it. And yet, somehow, the world keeps breathing. Maybe that's what victory really is. Not flags or parades, but the stubborn act of refusing to stay dead. Behrens hammers the final nail and steps back to admire the work. The repaired roof looks crude, uneven, but it holds. "There," he says proudly. "Proof the world still needs carpenters." You smile. "And teachers," you add. "Teachers?" He smirks. "You planning lessons already?" "First one's easy," you say. "Never believe men who promise 1,000 years." He laughs, genuine and deep. "I'll build you a chalkboard for that." The day stretches on, full of small sounds, hammers, voices, children laughing faintly in the distance. Each sound feels fragile, like a bird testing its wings after a long winter. And though the scars of war are everywhere, burned walls, hollow eyes, missing faces, you sense something stirring underneath. Life, Tentative, but real, like grass pushing through concrete. For the first time, you dare to hope that the story might not end in ruins after all. The morning air smells faintly of ash and sawdust, an oddly comforting combination. You and Barons have spent the last 2 days patching roofs, carrying bricks, and mending windows. Nobody pays, nobody commands. People simply show up, offer hands, tools, or bread, and work until they can't feel their fingers. It's as though the entire town has remembered what cooperation feels like after years of obedience. You stand in what used to be a square, now filled with makeshift stalls. A woman trades potatoes for candles. 2 boys drag a wagon of firewood, their laughter startling in its brightness. Somewhere nearby, someone's playing a harmonica, off-key, but beautiful all the same. Barons wipes sweat from his brow. "Listen to that," he says. "Music. Real music. Not marches or propaganda. Just noise that means nothing." "Maybe that's what peace sounds like," you say. He chuckles. "Peace sounds rusty." The world is still scarred, but you can feel it exhaling. For the first time in years, the air doesn't hum with orders. A cart rattles down the street, pulled by an old horse with one eye. Riding in the back are 2 Soviet soldiers and a German interpreter. They stop near the fountain, what's left of it, and begin reading from a paper. The interpreter's voice carries across the square. By order of the Allied command, all weapons must be surrendered. The war is over. Cooperation will ensure food and safety. Nobody cheers, but nobody objects either. People glance at one another, uncertain how to react to words they've prayed for and feared in equal measure. The soldiers collect a few rifles and pistols, nod politely, and move on. One of them tosses a cigarette to a teenager watching from a doorway. The boy stares at it like a miracle. Historians would later note that this moment, the quiet, unspectacular disarmament, was when Germany truly exhaled. No fanfare, no treaty, just exhaustion. Barons watches them leave. "Strange," he murmurs. "All those years and it ends with paperwork." "Maybe paperwork is what saves us next time," you reply. He grins. "You and your history lessons." That afternoon, you wander toward the edge of town. The fields are still littered with craters, but here and there, people are planting again. The soil is black and heavy, the earth itself carrying the memory of war. A farmer kneels, pressing seeds into the ground with trembling hands. If it grows, he tells you, we live. You help him for an hour, saying little. The work is slow but soothing, something steady in a world that's forgotten the word. When you return to the square, Barons is standing with a group of men around a small crate stamped with Cyrillic letters. Inside are loaves of bread, coarse, gray, dense. Soviet rations, probably surplus from the front. A soldier distributes them with surprising care, handing one to each family. "Eat," he says in broken German. "Strong people rebuild fast. You take your share and break it in half," handing the rest to a child nearby. He accepts it without speaking, his eyes wide with disbelief. A quirky detail floats to mind. After the war, Allied armies distributed millions of such loaves, each stamped with different initials. US, UK, CCCP. Some Germans later called them peace bread. You can see why. It's the taste of survival. Bland, heavy, miraculous. Later that evening, a meeting gathers in the repaired school. Word spreads fast. They're forming a council. Inside, the air smells of dust and ink. Around 20 townspeople sit on benches salvaged from the rubble. No uniforms, no flags, just faces weathered by fatigue. An elderly man stands at the front. His voice trembles but carries conviction. "No more orders from above," he says. "We'll decide things here, together." There's a murmur of agreement, tentative but real. Someone suggests organizing food distribution. Another volunteers to reopen the well. A woman proposes rebuilding the library, what's left of it. Barons leans toward you, whispering, "Look at that. Democracy, born out of starvation." You smile. It's a start. Historians will later call these Shadow councils, the first sprouts of local government before Allied administration arrived. Ordinary people rediscovering the art of decision-making after 12 years of dictatorship. It feels clumsy, but alive. After the meeting, you step outside into the cool night. The stars are brighter now, as if relieved to look down on something other than fire. A young man passes by carrying a bucket of water, whistling. You recognize the tune. It's Lily Marlene, the same song soldiers on both sides once sang. It sounds softer now, almost gentle. Behrens joins you, lighting a small pipe. You ever think, he says, about how many songs survived this madness? People burned books, smashed statues, shot each other, but nobody could kill a melody. You nod. Maybe that's how humanity cheats death. One chorus at a time. He exhales smoke that curls upward into the starlight. You should write that down. Put it in your history book. You grin. Maybe I will. Chapter 1. We somehow kept singing. The next day, you help clean the riverbank. Children collect debris, laughing as they throw planks into piles. The water glitters, faintly alive again. A woman washes clothes, humming under her breath. Everything is ordinary, and that's what makes it sacred. A cart from the east arrives carrying newspapers, real ones this time. The headlines declare Berlin falls and Germany surrenders. You run your fingers over the print, the ink still smudging. It feels unreal, like holding the ending of a story you've lived too long inside. You read aloud to the crowd gathering around. The Führer is confirmed dead. The war in Europe is officially over. Silence follows. Then quietly, an old man says, "Over." He repeats it again, testing the word like it might break. A woman crosses herself. Another starts crying, softly at first, then openly. Behrens looks down, his eyes glistening. "Over," he echoes. "Now what?" You fold the paper carefully. "Now we start the hard part." He smirks. "Rebuilding?" "Remembering," you say, without rewriting. That night, the town gathers around the fountain again. Someone produces a gramophone, miraculously still working. The record is scratchy, the melody faint, but people begin to hum along. Children dance in clumsy circles. A woman laughs, a sound so foreign it startles her own husband. Behrens raises his flask. "To the end," he says. Then softer, "and to beginnings that don't kill anyone." You drink to that. The moon rises pale over the ruins, painting everything in silver and shadow. It feels like an old photograph developing in real time, something fragile, but undeniably alive. Historians will later call these days the quiet resurrection. No flags, no speeches, just the slow rebirth of small things. Laughter, bread, music, conversation. The Reich had tried to build eternity. The survivors learned to settle for tomorrow. When you finally lie down to sleep, the wind carries the faint echo of hammers, dogs barking, a baby crying, all the ordinary symphony of living. You close your eyes and realize that peace doesn't sound like silence. It sounds like noise, the gentle, chaotic noise of people daring to exist again. You drift off with a single thought repeating in your mind. Maybe history isn't what we remember. Maybe it's what we rebuild. And for the first time since 1945 began, you dream not of war, but of mourning. By the following week, the world feels like it's waking from anesthesia. The pain is still there, throbbing, dull. But so is sensation. You can smell bread baking again. You can hear laughter that isn't nervous. Even the birds have returned, hopping over the rubble as if to inspect humanity's handiwork. You and Behrens walk to the edge of town to gather wood. The path winds through what was once a forest, but is now a field of stumps, most of them cut down for firewood during the long winters of the war. The ground is soft underfoot, the air damp with the scent of pine sap. Behrens pauses near a felled tree and runs his hand across the bark. "Feels strange to chop wood for warmth instead of barricades," he says. "You'll get used to it," you reply. "Humans are good at pretending things are normal." He chuckles, low and tired. "That's our true superpower." You load the wagon with logs and turn back toward the town. Along the road, you pass a column of Soviet trucks moving west. The soldiers inside are quiet, their faces unreadable. One of them waves. By the afternoon, the town square has transformed. Where there were ruins, now stand crude stalls selling bread, salt, and hand-woven baskets. A sign reads, "Markt jeden Dienstag," market every Tuesday. Someone even painted flowers on the corners. The bright colors look almost obscene against the gray walls, but beautiful nonetheless. At the fountain, the new town council is distributing a quirky detail you'd once read in a pre-war newspaper returns to mind. The phrase, "civilization begins with a receipt." You finally understand it. Barons pockets his ration card and grins. "We've traded rifles for paperwork," he says. "I call that progress." "Paperwork never shoots back," you reply. In the afternoon, a group of Allied officials arrives. British this time, judging by the khaki uniforms and calm efficiency. They speak through interpreters, inspecting the reconstruction efforts. One officer nods approvingly at the repaired schoolhouse. Another scribbles in a notebook. The children watch them curiously from behind fences. One soldier kneels, hands out a bar of chocolate. The kids hesitate, unsure if it's a trick, then snatch it and run. The laughter that follows is pure, startled, honest. Barons watches the scene, eyes glinting. "You think they know who we were?" "Everyone knows," you say quietly, but they're choosing to forget for a moment. The next day, the first train whistle in months cuts through the morning. You and half the town walk to the station to see it. The locomotive limps into view, black smoke puffing weakly from its stack. Its cars are dented, paint blistered, but it moves. A miracle of steel and stubbornness. As it screeches to a halt, the engineer leans out, grinning like a man reborn. "From Frankfurt," he shouts. "We're running again." The crowd cheers. Not loud, but long. Someone throws their cap in the air. The whistle sounds again, and you swear it's the most beautiful noise you've ever heard. Historians would later write that when Germany's trains began running again, that's when hope truly returned. Not speeches, not treaties, just the simple rhythm of wheels on tracks. Proof that movement, even slow, still existed. You spend that evening at the tavern, now repaired enough to serve soup and beer brewed from leftover barley. The owner toasts everyone who enters. "To being alive," he says. The crowd answers. "To being alive," as if it's both prayer and joke. Baron sits beside you, hands wrapped around a chipped mug. "You know," he says, "I never thought I'd drink again without guilt." You sip yours slowly. "We've earned guilt. We might as well earn forgiveness too." He studies you for a moment. "You really going to teach again?" "Maybe," you say. "If there's anyone left to listen." "There will be," he says. "People always want to understand the fire after they've put it out." Later that night, as you walk home, the streets glow with the soft amber of lanterns. The shadows stretch long but harmless. You pass a half-collapsed wall where someone has scrawled new graffiti. "Nie weiter Krieg. Never again war." You stop to trace the letters with your fingertips. They're still wet, the paint smelling of turpentine and defiance. Barons glances back. "You think they mean it?" "I think they want to." He nods. "That's a start." The next morning, you wake to a knock at the door. It's a young woman from the council, holding a small envelope. "The Soviets want lists," she says. "Every able worker, every child, every teacher." "Teacher?" you repeat. She smiles faintly. "They said if you used to teach, you should again. People need lessons." You open the envelope. Inside is a form stamped with a red star and the words, "Temporary Education Appointment." You laugh despite yourself. "History's cruel," you say. "It always drags me back in." That afternoon, you walk into the repaired school. The walls are bare, the blackboard cracked, but sunlight spills through the windows. A dozen children sit on mismatched benches, staring at you like you're part of a fairy tale. Baron stands in the doorway, arms crossed, grinning. "Go on," he says. "Give them the short version." You clear your throat. "All right," you begin. "Let's talk about how wars begin." The children lean forward, eyes wide. You pause, glance out the window, and see the faint smoke of a distant train. "They begin," you say slowly,
When people stop thinking for themselves.
One boy raises his hand. And how do they end? You smile.
When people remember they can. Outside, the hammering continues. The birds sing, and the sun glints off shattered glass like new diamonds. You feel something strange stir in your chest. Not pride, not relief, but something gentler. Continuance. Behrens lingers a while, listening from the doorway before leaving to fetch more wood. When the lesson ends, the children file out quietly, some waving shyly. You stay behind, tracing a piece of chalk across the broken board. The sound is rough but reassuring. You write 2 words. Nie wieder. Never again. You stand there for a long time, the chalk dust on your fingers, the faint hum of the town outside, a heartbeat returning after years underground. Later that evening, Behrens returns with fresh planks. For desks, he says, the kids can't learn sitting on crates. You take one end of the timber and help him lift. The motion feels like prayer, work turned into redemption. As the sun sets, the town glows gold and orange, shadows stretching across the rebuilt square. A new flag, plain white, hangs from the council hall, fluttering gently. No eagles, no symbols, just blankness. A beginning. And in that empty cloth, you see something pure. Not surrender, not shame, but space. The possibility of rewriting. You look at Behrens. Maybe dull isn't so bad after all. He grins. Dull means we get to grow old. You nod, smiling. Then let's grow old slowly. The wind carries laughter from somewhere down the street. A child's, you think. You can't remember the last time you heard that sound without flinching. And as night falls, you realize something simple but immense. The world doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to stay awake. Spring deepens before you notice it. The snows vanish almost overnight, leaving the streets streaked with mud and color. The air smells of wet soil and smoke, a perfume only a country coming back from the grave can make. You walk through the market one morning and for the first time since the war began, you hear arguments. Not about rations or surrender, but about prices, about gossip, about whose goat wandered where. It's ordinary, and that makes it glorious. Behrens is now the town's unofficial carpenter. You find him outside the new bakery, rebuilt on the very foundation of the one where you first hid during the shelling, measuring planks for a doorframe. People are buying bread again, he says, nodding toward the queue that stretches down the street. That's how you know civilization isn't extinct. You grin. Bread and bureaucracy, the twin pillars of peace. He laughs, and for a moment you both just watch the line move. A woman leaves the bakery holding a loaf still steaming in the cold air. The smell alone feels like forgiveness. Inside the school, things are changing too. More children arrive every day. Thin, shy, some without parents. The desks Behrens built wobble, the chalk crumbles, but the room hums with life. You've started lessons again, simple at first, reading, writing, maps, but inevitably, they ask about the war. One boy raises his hand. Teacher, he says, why did everyone fight? You take a deep breath. The question has no clean answer. Because too many people stopped asking questions, you say finally. And too many others were afraid of the answers. The boy nods slowly, as if he's memorizing the line for later. Historians will debate for decades how post-war Germany found its conscience. Through guilt, through education, through shame. But sitting here among cracked windows and mismatched chairs, you see the first faint outline of it. Curiosity. The courage to ask why. Behrens visits after class one afternoon, carrying a small wooden box. Payment, he says, handing it to you. Inside are half a dozen pencils he carved himself. Can't rebuild minds without tools. You turn one over in your hand, the wood smooth and warm. They'll outlast us, you tell him. Good, he says. That's the point. That night, the council calls another meeting. The British officers return, this time with translators and a stack of papers. New directives, one explains. We need teachers, craftsmen, doctors, people who can keep things moving. Behrens volunteers immediately. I'll help prepare the bridges, he says. You add your name to the education register. The officer nods approvingly. "Reconstruction begins here," he says. "You're the lucky ones."
Lucky. You roll the word around in your head. It doesn't fit yet, but it doesn't hurt either.
The next day, a rumor spreads. Americans are approaching from the west. They'll soon meet the Soviets somewhere near the Elbe River. The war in Europe, truly, officially, is about to end. People whisper the news with disbelief, as if saying it too loudly might break the spell. You and Barons climb the hill outside town to see for yourselves. The horizon shimmers with columns of smoke, but between them, you spot movement. Convoys, tents, flags you can't quite identify. The war's last breaths, visible from a distance. Baron sits on a rock, lighting his pipe. "When I was a boy," he says, "my father told me history moves in circles. But this doesn't feel like a circle. Feels like falling off a map." "Maybe that's where new maps begin," you reply. He nods slowly. "If we're the cartographers, let's draw fewer borders this time." You stay on the hill until nightfall, watching the stars blink awake. There are more of them now, clearer, as if the smoke has finally thinned enough for heaven to look down again. A few days later, the Americans arrive. Their trucks rumble into town, olive green and dust-covered, draped with white stars. The children run beside them, shouting greetings. Soldiers toss chewing gum, chocolate, even cigarettes. The younger ones treat the GIs like circus performers. The older ones watch silently, trying to reconcile uniformed men who smile with the memory of those who didn't. The American commander meets with the Soviet lieutenant near the fountain. Cameras click, history freezing itself in black and white. You stand at the edge of the crowd, watching two armies shake hands over the ashes of a continent. The people cheer, though softly, as if afraid of jinxing peace. Later that evening, one of the American soldiers, a lanky kid from Ohio, no older than Kurt would have been, stops by your school. "You the teacher?" he asks in broken German. "Yes," you say. He grins, offering a pack of paper and pencils. "From the Red Cross," he says. "For the kids." You take it, suddenly unable to speak. "Thank you," you manage. He shrugs. "You rebuild. We'll send more." Then he tips his helmet and walks off, humming some tune you don't recognize. The next morning, you distribute the new paper to your students. They stare at the crisp sheets as though they're relics from another civilization. You tell them to draw whatever they want. No rules. Within minutes, the room fills with scratching pencils. Some draw houses, others flowers. One, a tank half buried in earth. A little girl sketches a bird flying over a broken city. You stop at her desk. "That's beautiful," you say. She looks up. "It's leaving," she says. "Where?" "Anywhere it wants." Outside, Barons is repairing a window shutter. The sound of his hammer blends with the rustle of pages, a duet of construction. For the first time, the town sounds alive without pretending to be brave. Historians would later call this period Zero Hour, Stunde Null, the moment Germany hit the absolute reset. The slate wiped clean, but still scratched from the past. In truth, it doesn't feel like zero. It feels like one, fragile, hesitant, but forward. That evening, you and Barons share a quiet drink by the river. The water moves sluggishly, carrying pieces of driftwood downstream. "You know," he says, "I think we might make it." You glance at him. "All of us?" He shrugs. "Enough of us." A group of children runs past, chasing a ball made of rags. One tumbles, laughs, then gets back up. The sound echoes off the water, bright and simple. Baron smiles. "You should write that down too. Chapter 2. The children laughed again." You laugh with him. "Maybe I will." Night settles gently. Across the river, lanterns flicker in the windows of houses being rebuilt. Somewhere, a radio crackles with music. American swing this time. Brassy and alien and wonderful. You listen, tapping your foot unconsciously. Barons leans back, watching the stars. "You think we'll ever stop talking about the war?" "No," you say, "but maybe we'll start talking about what comes after." He nods. "Fair trade."
A soft breeze carries the scent of grass and wood smoke. The world feels younger, though you both know it isn't. Maybe it's just that you've survived long enough to see it breathing again. You toss a pebble into the river and watch the ripples spread outward, fading into the dark. Behrens follows suit. "For Kurt," he says quietly. You add another. "For everyone who didn't get to see this." The ripples merge, disappear. For a long moment, neither of you speaks. Then Behrens sighs, half a laugh, half a prayer. Strange thing, hope. It shows up late, but it always keeps the door unlocked. You look toward the town, where the white flag on the council hall still flutters, blank and unmarked. Behind it, the faint lights of new windows glow. Each one feels like a promise, written in glass. We are still here. And as the night hums with quiet life, you realize the truth you'll teach your students one day. Not the dates or the battles, but this. History is not what ends. It's what begins again, quietly, when nobody's watching. By early summer, the town has a rhythm again. It's an uneven rhythm, half limping, half dancing, but it's music nonetheless. The days are long, the sun gentle, and the air heavy with the smell of blooming lilacs that somehow survived all the explosions. Children play tag in the square. Soldiers from both occupying armies trade cigarettes for bread, and the baker's wife has started singing while she works. Every morning, you open the classroom windows wide and let the air in. The breeze moves through the room, stirring the dust into lazy spirals. The children groan at arithmetic, but light up when you tell stories. History lessons have become your quiet rebellion. No propaganda, no slogans, just truths spoken softly enough to sound like fables. Once upon a time, you say, there was a country that forgot how to listen, so it shouted until its voice broke. A boy in the back, Hans, bright but wary, raises his hand. And did it learn? Not yet, you answer, but maybe its children will. Behrens sometimes sits in the back during these lessons, pretending to repair chairs. He listens more than he works, though. When the children leave, he'll nod at you and say, "You're planting seeds in a field that used to grow thorns." "And you're building desks in a country that used to build tanks?" you reply. He grins. Progress. In the evenings, you and Behrens still meet by the river. The water's clearer now, reflecting the orange glow of sunset. Fishermen have returned, their lines swaying lazily in the current. One of them brings a small catch to trade for bread. The barter economy of survival has slowly transformed into one of choice. That night, he tells you he's been offered a position by the Reconstruction Committee in Dresden. They need carpenters who can build fast, he says, half proud, half apologetic. Bridges, scaffolds, housing for the refugees. Real work. You feel a pang of something that isn't quite sadness, more like the ache of losing a landmark. You'll go? He nods. Someone has to. The city's nothing but smoke and stone. Maybe I can make it less dead, you smile faintly. You've been resurrecting ghosts since the day I met you. He laughs softly. Then I'm the right man for Dresden. Historians would later write that in those first months after the surrender, millions of displaced Germans scattered across the ruins, chasing rumors of home or work. The country was a great tide, ebbing and flowing through its own wreckage. The day he leaves, the town gathers to see him off. The children bring flowers, wild, uneven, beautiful. You hand him a small notebook, its cover made of thin wood. Inside are pages filled with your students' handwriting. The first line reads, "For the man who built our desks." He turns it over in his hands, eyes glistening. "You'd make a decent writer, you know," he says. You shrug. "I prefer teaching the next ones." He claps your shoulder, smiling that quiet carpenter's smile. "Then keep them honest. And if you ever find yourself in Dresden, follow the sound of hammers." You watch his cart disappear down the road until it's just a speck of dust swallowed by sunlight. That night, you walk alone through the town. The streets feel emptier without his laugh echoing off the walls. But there's still life. Someone strumming a guitar by the tavern. A baby crying in a second-floor window. The rhythmic thud of someone hammering far away. The sounds overlap like pieces of a broken song, slowly finding harmony again. The next morning, you visit the town's cemetery. Small, half overgrown, and recently expanded. Wooden markers, crude and splintered, stand among the weeds. Some graves have names, others just dates. You kneel beside one marked Kurt. The letters are fading already. You clear away the grass, fix the crooked plank, and whisper, "You'd have liked the school." The desks don't splinter anymore. A lark lands on the cross above him, sings once and flies off. You take that as acknowledgement. When you return to the classroom, the children are drawing maps again. "Where do we go from here?" one girl asks, pencil hovering uncertainly above a blank page. "Wherever we choose," you answer. That's the gift the ashes left us. Outside, an Allied truck rumbles past, its bed filled with crates marked books. The driver waves, you wave back. Later that day, the council delivers them to you. They're a mismatched collection. Goethe, Dickens, Marx, fairy tales, even a volume of astronomy. Half of them are scorched at the edges, rescued from abandoned libraries. You line them up along the windowsill. The children crowd around, wide-eyed. You let them choose freely. One boy picks a book of myths and holds it as if it might explode. "These are safe now," you tell them. "No one will burn them again." Historians often point to these scattered book shipments as symbols of Germany's rebirth. Not tanks or treaties, but paper and ink. You can see why. The smell of old pages fills the room like incense. That evening, you read aloud from one of them. Grimm's The Fisherman and His Wife. The story feels fitting, a tale of greed and consequences, of wanting too much until everything collapses. When you finish, the children are quiet for a long time. Finally, Hans says, "Maybe we were the wife." You nod slowly. "Maybe. But the sea gave us another chance." After class, you linger by the window, watching dusk gather over the rooftops. Smoke from the baker's chimney curls upward, soft and steady. For a fleeting moment, you imagine Behrens hammering away in Dresden, sweat on his brow, humming off-key. Weeks pass. The town continues to knit itself together, like an old sweater repaired by loving hands. A post office opens. The tavern hosts music nights, swing, waltz, even a bit of jazz when someone finds a working gramophone. The first newspaper arrives by train. Neue Zeit, New Time. Its front page shows Berlin in ruins, but its headline reads simply, "We begin again." You keep the paper, folding it neatly between the pages of your journal. One Sunday afternoon, while the church bells ring faintly from the rebuilt steeple, you take a long walk beyond the fields. The horizon is green now, not gray. Grass covers the old craters. Wildflowers sprout where tanks once sank. You sit on a stone and listen, just listen. There are no gunshots, no sirens, no commands. Only wind, birds, and the faint hum of a world trying to forgive itself. A stray dog pads up beside you, ribs showing but tail wagging. You share a piece of bread with it. "You and me both," you murmur, "scavengers of history." The dog curls up at your feet, sighing like it understands. For the first time in years, you allow yourself to breathe without counting seconds. When you return to town, a letter waits for you. It's from Dresden. The handwriting is clumsy but familiar. The bridges stand. Not pretty, but they hold. "I told them about you. They said they need teachers here too. If you come, bring stories. We could use some laughter." You read it that night. You gather the children at the riverbank and tell them about your friend, the carpenter, who builds bridges that don't collapse. He says every plank matters, you tell them, because someday, someone will walk across and not even know it was once broken. One girl raises her hand. "Will we get to see the bridges?" "Maybe," you say. "Maybe one day." You look out across the river. The current is smooth now, carrying reflections of lanterns from the opposite shore. Each light wavers, then steadies, tiny suns floating through the dark. And you realize that's what the future is. Not a single flame, but thousands of trembling ones that refuse to go out. The summer heat comes early that year, rolling in with the smell of cut grass and rain-soaked dust.
The air hums with insects, and the once silent town sounds alive again. Hammers, chatter, bicycle bells, the squeak of wagon wheels carrying sacks of flour. The war still lingers in the corners, of course. Craters half filled with weeds, broken windows patched with cardboard, faces that flinch at loud noises. But life has learned how to talk over the ruins. You begin teaching outside whenever the weather allows. The children sit in a circle beneath the chestnut tree by the school, notebooks balanced on their knees. Sometimes, when the sun hits the pages just right, the white paper almost blinds you. A clean slate made literal. Today's lesson is about rebuilding. You draw 2 columns on the chalkboard, what was destroyed and what was saved. The answers come slowly at first.
Buildings, says one. Books, adds another. A girl in the back hesitates, then whispers, people.
You nod. Yes, some.
Behrens would have liked that answer. You think of him often, hammering somewhere in Dresden, probably cursing at crooked beams, but smiling all the same. The thought makes you smile too.
At midday, the children are dismissed, and you stay behind to tidy the scattered papers. The square is busy again. Vendors selling cherries, soldiers playing cards, mothers trading recipes like currency. The white flag on the council hall still flutters above it all, blank as ever. You like it that way. Every wind that touches it rewrites the past in silence. A man from the British administration stops by the school in the afternoon. His uniform is neat, his German precise. We're cataloging educators, he explains. Reconstruction needs minds as well as hands. He hands you a small card marked Lehrer, approved.
You trace the printed letters. Approved, you murmur. Feels strange to be official again.
He smiles politely.
The best revolutions begin with paperwork. Then he salutes and moves on, clipboard in hand.
When evening falls, you walk down to the river. The dog that found you weeks ago, now named Otto, follows close behind. You sit on the same stone where you and Behrens once talked about maps and circles. The fields are golden now, full of wheat tall enough to whisper secrets when the wind passes through. The water glimmers under the setting sun, smooth as glass. You toss a pebble, watch the ripples spread. Somewhere far off, a church bell rings, steady, familiar. You close your eyes and imagine its echo crossing the whole country, ringing through ruins and forests, through cities that no longer exist, and cities being born from dust. Historians will later call this year the year of quiet forgiveness. It wasn't that the world forgot, it just decided to keep breathing. Back in town, the council has organized an evening gathering, a festival of lights, they call it. People hang lanterns from windows, candles glow in jars along the streets. The idea, someone said, was to drive away the darkness that lingered too long. You stand in the square as the first candles are lit. Their reflections shimmer in puddles left by afternoon rain. Children run between them, holding paper lamps shaped like stars. The whole town glows faintly, as if wrapped in a fragile constellation. A young woman from the bakery recognizes you. "Teacher," she says, handing you a small loaf. "For tomorrow's lesson." You smile. "For tomorrow's breakfast, maybe." She laughs. "Both." Nearby, an old man with a violin begins to play. The tune isn't a march or a hymn, it's a lullaby. The same melody mothers once used to quiet their children during air raids. But now it sounds different, lighter, slower, tired in a good way. You find yourself humming along. Otto curls up at your feet, sighing like an old soldier who's finally been given leave. You scratch behind his ears and whisper, "We made it, didn't we?" He doesn't answer, but the wag of his tail says enough. Later, you wander through the crowd, taking it all in. The laughter, the clinking cups, the smell of bread and wax. Someone hands you a cup of thin wine, and you sip it slowly. It's sour but real. You hear someone mention Berlin, the trials beginning, the politicians returning. Another whispers about borders shifting, new countries being drawn. You listen, but your mind drifts back to the classroom, to the questions that matter more. Why did everyone fight? And what happens now? As the music fades,
The mayor climbs the fountain steps and clears his throat. "Tonight," he says, "we don't celebrate victory or defeat. We celebrate endurance." His voice trembles. "The fact that we are still here to argue, to work, to live." The crowd applauds softly, the kind of applause meant not for spectacle, but for understanding. The violinist plays again, slower now, and people begin to hum along. The melody winds through the streets like smoke, carrying with it 100 unspoken apologies. You stand beneath the white flag, looking up at it as the night breeze catches it once more. For a heartbeat, it almost looks like wings. When the candles burn low and the square empties, you linger a little longer. Otto yawns beside you. The moon climbs high, reflecting in puddles that mirror the sky. The world, for all its scars, looks almost beautiful. You think about the people who didn't live to see this. The boys of the Volkssturm, the civilians who froze in the rubble, the countless faces lost to propaganda and pride. And then you think about Barents, somewhere far to the east, still building bridges. You whisper to the night, "Keep him safe." The wind answers softly through the trees, as if agreeing. You head home past the school. Through the window, you can see the children's drawings pinned to the wall. Houses, rivers, stars, bridges. Each one imperfect, each one radiant. You stop to look at the chalkboard through the glass. The words are still there. Nie wieder, never again. You press your hand against the window pane, feeling its coolness against your skin. "Hold that thought," you whisper, because you know how easily people forget. Still, something tells you these children won't. Time slows as the lanterns gutter out one by one, leaving the town draped in silver moonlight. You sit by the open window, listening to the faint hum of the world settling into sleep. The air carries traces of everything: the warmth of fires, the sweetness of bread, the salt of tears no one bothered to hide. You exhale and let your shoulders fall. For years, you've lived in tension, waiting for orders, for endings, for explosions. But now the only sound is the soft pulse of life returning, an uneven heartbeat, but steady enough. Out beyond the hills, the first birds begin to stir. Their songs are thin, hesitant, as if the dawn itself is unsure it's allowed to come back. You smile. "Go on," you murmur. "It's safe now." You close your eyes. In the dark behind them, you see Barons laughing, Kurt smiling, the children at their desks, all of them framed in morning light. The images fade slowly, like photographs left too long in the sun, but their warmth remains. When you open your eyes again, the horizon is paling. The world's quiet promise of one more day. The war that swallowed everything has retreated into memory, leaving you here, breathing, watching a sky that no longer hides from itself. You whisper, almost a lullaby, "Rest easy, old world. We'll take it from here." And with that, you lie back, letting the sound of the river and the soft rustle of curtains lull you to sleep. The story, for now, is over. But morning is only a few breaths away.